I'm Alejandro Alba, host and correspondent for Now This, the leading news outlet on social media, and I'll be your moderator. This segment will consist of a series of 3 speakers that will highlight human impacts on the ocean and their effects on the livelihoods of marine and human life. Later, we'll meet with Dr. Kim Curry, who's a marine chemist for the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, and Dr. Kevin Conrad, the medical director of Community Affairs and Health Policy at Ochsner Health. Our first speaker is Danny Washington, co-founder of Big Blue and You, who will provide a general overview of human impacts on the ocean with a focus on 3 main challenges: climate change, marine pollution, and the degradation of marine biodiversity to ocean life. Danny is a science communicator, television host, ocean advocate, and the first African-American woman to host a nationally broadcast syndicated science television series in the United States. In 2008, she co-founded the nonprofit organization Big Blue and You with her mother and business partner to inspire and educate youth about marine conservation through the arts and media. We are delighted to have Danny join us today.
Hello and happy World Oceans Day. My name is Danny Washington, and it is an honor to join all of you in this virtual celebration. This year's theme of life and livelihoods truly hits home. The ocean is life. No matter where you live on this planet, ocean health plays a role in every type of livelihood we depend on to sustain ourselves. As I reflect on the global events of the past 14 months, we are undoubtedly living through some of the toughest times in human history that continue to test the limits of our individual and collective optimism for the future. And much of this uncertainty has forced many to question the ways in which we build our livelihoods. But now, more than ever, we must recognize this time that it's one of the greatest opportunities of our generation. We have the chance to turn the tide and restore ocean health as well as our own health. This is our window to act. The Second World Oceans Assessment, launched in April, tells us that there is no time to waste. The wide spectrum of challenges are not easy to accept, but the reality is there is no other path other than facing something difficult head-on. With open minds and open hearts, we can accelerate the journey toward a just and sustainable future. Rising ocean temperatures, extreme climate events, shrinking ice sheets, sea level rise, and ocean acidification are clear signals that our unbalanced way of life is not working. The climate crisis is happening in real time. 20 years ago, when I was a teenager, many of these concepts about a changing climate were taught to us as if these events were going to happen in the far-off, distant future. Now, in my 30s, it's almost inconceivable to see that these catastrophic events happening around the planet, and at the same time, think about the actions we could have taken sooner to prevent them. Thanks to the Second World Oceans Assessment, we are in a position to better understand the current state of the ocean and grasp how it's rapidly transforming in various ways due to climate change. And with any great challenge, we need bold solutions. Extreme climate events are increasing in severity, and sea level rise has made coastal cities susceptible to erosion and flooding. Mitigating impact through substantial investments in infrastructure and community-driven restoration of natural barriers like mangrove forests, coral reefs, and sand dunes are tangible ways people can contribute. Lower emissions worldwide are an effective way to slow down the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere created by human activities, and in turn, decrease the pace of ocean acidification, as will be discussed by Dr. Curry later in this segment. Blue carbon coastal ecosystems like kelp and mangrove forests are the most effective way of sequestering the excess carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Other changes in ocean salinity and temperature are altering the distribution of certain marine species, which inadvertently impacts the overall well-being of humans along the coasts and affects their economy as well. There are conveyor belts of currents circumnavigating the globe, which is what regulates temperature on Earth. Climate change, melting glaciers, and changing surface temperatures are slowing down the global conveyor belt. If our planetary heating and cooling system is compromised, hot places get hotter, cold places get colder, making it hard for us to find our home on Earth. Ocean circulation is one example of how warming of the ocean can translate into changes in the distribution of nutrients and how much carbon the ocean can take in. According to the World Ocean Assessment, more than 90% of the excess heat from our global warming is stored in our oceans. The rate of ocean heat content has doubled since the 1990s. Even with all of this knowledge, we only have one ocean, which is inextricably linked in ways that we have yet to understand. Climate change multiplies already existing injustices and puts vulnerable and disadvantaged communities at risk of more harm. Those who are most impacted by the decline of ocean health and climate change must be prioritized. Together, we can mitigate the negative repercussions, causing disproportionately more suffering and destruction for those on the front lines. We can see this type of injustice through the lens of marine pollution, which continues to spoil once pristine shorelines and waterways. Beyond the 5 trillion pieces of plastic floating in the ocean has also become a dumping ground for toxic waste, sewage, and chemical runoff. Although a large portion of the marine debris that enters the ocean sinks to the sea floor, the remaining items find their way back to shorelines and litter the coasts, entangling marine life and disrupting livelihoods along the way. The ocean continues to regurgitate the trash on beaches and remind us that our insatiable consumption of materials like plastic is a driving force. But while it's important to assess and adjust our personal consumption of single-use goods, it's also crucial for corporations to maintain responsibility for the materials they use in the products they sell. It is time for better decisions by governments and policymakers that truly prioritize the health of people and the planet. Dr. Conrad will be diving deeper into the impacts of a changing ocean on human health in this segment to follow. Now is the moment to invest our focus, energy, and resources back into nature like never before. A wealth of knowledge about how to live in harmony with nature remains embedded in local, traditional, and indigenous wisdom, safeguarded by populations around the world. Continued unchecked exploitation and extraction of living and non-living resources from the ocean will not sustain our species. Many modern practices have depleted our big fish stocks by 90% and destroyed more than 50% of our world's coral reefs. By recognizing the behaviors that have led us to this point, we can efficiently assess how to change those behaviors. A circular economy is the only way to achieve the lifestyle we hope to create that works in harmony with nature. Space and time are necessary for the ocean to heal. Perhaps not exactly as we knew it before, but hopefully something stronger that can withstand the ever-changing external factors as we work to mitigate the impacts of the climate crisis. Well-monitored and enforced marine protected areas are essential for recovery. Each of us can galvanize our communities to support the establishment of more MPAs in order to reach the goal of 30% by 2030. But there are many who would rather work toward a more ambitious target of protecting 50% by 2044. With only 5.3% of our ocean protected currently, we have a lot of work to do, and we need to move quickly. There is still much to celebrate about the ocean, so much to protect and cherish. The ocean is going to continue to evolve and change, and so will we. But I truly believe that we will not succeed in protecting our planet until we step up and protect and uplift our fellow humans first, especially vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. Additionally, our environmentalism must be intersectional, where we take into consideration the ways our lived experiences inform the way we operate within our livelihoods. Human connection to the ocean is a vital piece of the puzzle to restoring our blue planet. The relatable stories that we share truly help shape the world and how others perceive it. From the words we say to the actions we demonstrate on a daily basis, everyone has the power to shift the narrative through their positive influence. Our willingness to explore, restore, and protect what remains will ultimately determine our future. Through purpose-driven collaboration with others, we can create innovative strategies and scalable nature-based solutions. We need people from all walks of life to join forces and contribute their unique skill set to the acceleration of our mission. Scientists, storytellers, entrepreneurs, artists, and advocates working together as one to amplify action for a healthy ocean. Those who don't have access to the ocean or maybe lack the ability to swim should still have other opportunities to meet the ocean through technologies like virtual and augmented reality. The way in which we tell stories about the ocean can generate more empathy for marine life and motivate more people to consider the ocean in everything they do on a daily basis. Nature has already mastered the art of adaptation, and there is much we can learn from observing the natural world around us. Your observations could spark an idea that could lead to the next scalable solution that could solve a major challenge facing the ocean. But it's up to you to take the first step towards seeking answers and building community with others who can support a shared vision. Today, as you celebrate the wonders and beauty of our blue planet, stop and think about the ways you can get started on your journey toward honoring the ocean in your everyday life, in your community. Every wave of change begins with a single drop. We are the ones we've been waiting for to lead us into the future we want and need. There's no more time to waste. The ocean needs us, and we need the ocean. Thank you so much, and happy World Oceans Day.
Our next presenter is Dr. Kim Curry, a marine chemist for the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research in New Zealand. With a focus on marine carbon chemistry, Dr. Curry is a part of a multidisciplinary team working on coastal ocean acidification in New Zealand. She is also responsible for the Munida Time series, a long-running transect of ocean carbon measurements off the coast of New Zealand. Dr. Curry will zoom in on the issue of ocean acidification and highlight the drivers and effects on marine biodiversity.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Happy World Ocean Day. My name is Kim Curry, and I'm a marine scientist with the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research in New Zealand. Over the last 250 years, human activities such as fossil fuel burning and changing land use have added carbon dioxide to our atmosphere, leading to global warming and climate change. However, only about half of the carbon dioxide that's been put into the atmosphere by human activities has stayed there. About a quarter is absorbed by the ocean, and the rest is taken up by the terrestrial biosphere. One of the consequences of the ocean taking up this large amount of carbon is a phenomenon called ocean acidification. So I'm going to get a little bit technical here. Carbon dioxide absorbed by the ocean reacts with the seawater in a series of chemical reactions which result in an increase in the hydrogen ion concentration and a decrease in the carbonate ion concentration in the seawater, as well as some other changes. The increased hydrogen ion concentration causes an increase in the seawater acidity. So what does this mean in practice? The changes in the ocean chemistry affect marine organisms and environments, and particularly it impacts animals which make calcium carbonate shells. So the higher the acidity of the seawater, the harder it is for the shellfish, such as oysters and mussels, to build their shells, and the more likely it is for structures such as coral reefs to dissolve in the more acidic waters. Since about the 1980s, scientists have been making meticulous measurements of these chemical changes at several open ocean sites, such as the Pacific Ocean near Hawaii, near Bermuda in the Atlantic Ocean, in the Erminger Sea near Iceland, and near New Zealand in the Southwest Pacific Ocean, where I live and work. So these careful and accurate measurements have shown that the acidity of the seawater varies naturally due to drivers such as changing water temperature, marine plankton blooms, and upwelling of deep water. So these factors vary naturally from time to time, summer to winter, year to year, and also place to place around the globe. So the ocean acidity naturally varies through the global ocean. But as well as the natural variability at these diverse sites near Hawaii, near Bermuda, in Iceland, near New Zealand, they are all showing a slow and steady increase in acidity due to the uptake of human-produced carbon dioxide. Since the Industrial Revolution 250 years ago, the average ocean acidity has already increased by about 30%. And if humans continue to emit carbon dioxide at the same rate as we're doing now, then the ocean acidity will increase by as much as 150% by the end of this century. That's now only 80 years away and within the lifetime of many of our children. The changing carbon chemistry in the ocean affects many organisms and marine ecosystems. A decrease in the carbonate ion concentration particularly impacts animals which make calcium carbonate shells. Shellfish such as mussels, oysters, and paua, abalone, have difficulty in forming their shell structure, and juvenile animals are particularly vulnerable. The energy needed to make the shell is then not available for other activities such as feeding, for breeding, and for escaping from predators. In extreme situations, the shell doesn't form properly, or it can begin to dissolve once the shell is made. Oyster farmers in the United States have seen the shells of baby oysters in their hatcheries misform or sometimes dissolve completely because of the acidic waters compromising the development of the oyster larvae in their hatcheries. And this has led to major economic loss and subsequent modification of the aquaculture industry operating conditions. Ocean acidification is also dissolving the shells and damaging sensory organs of the young Dungeness crabs, which are another economically important species for the United States West Coast. Coral reefs are also made from calcium carbonate, and so the reef structures are also vulnerable to the same stresses as the shellfish. More energy is needed for these animals to make the reef structure, and there's an increased tendency for the reef to dissolve in the more corrosive waters. On the other hand, marine plants such as mangroves, kelp, and seagrass meadows will benefit from the increasing carbon in the waters. So this can even be used as a tool to help remediate the worst impacts of ocean acidification, because the plants can absorb carbon in the water column and potentially buffer to improve the conditions for the organisms that are living nearby. So as the ocean becomes more acidic, there are so-called winners and losers. However, these species don't live in isolation, they live together in communities. And the structure and composition of these marine communities and ecosystems will change. Biodiversity, food quality and quantity, and predator-prey relationships will be affected. And then these changes will flow through the marine food chain and have far-reaching consequences. Many people are feeling a sense of anxiety as the environment around us is becoming increasingly degraded and our lifestyles are becoming impacted. We feel helpless, with predictions of future change making the coming decades seem uncertain and even frightening. And ocean acidification is only one of the pressures that coastal oceans are facing. We have warming sea temperatures, decreased oxygen levels, sea level rise, increased pollution, species extinction, increased storms, severe weather events. The list goes on, and the consequences are seeming relentless. So an important question is, what can we do as individuals, as communities, and as global interconnected families, so we can minimize the impact of these environmental change and personally give ourselves some empowerment to cope with the global issues? The good news is that there are actions that we can take now and expand upon in the next decades that will help us prepare for and work towards a more resilient future. As well as being dependent on the ocean for food, economic, cultural, and recreational activities, I believe that we all have a responsibility to look after the health of our coastal and marine environments. In New Zealand, we call this kaitiakitanga, and the Māori people of Aotearoa, New Zealand, believe that the sea and its bounty is a treasure that has been passed down to us that we must look after and to pass to future generations. In New Zealand, there's a Māori whakatauki or proverb. Toi tū te marae a tāne, toi tū te marae a Tangaroa, toi tū te iwi. If the land is well and the sea is well, then the people will thrive. Globally, we can collaborate and coordinate to increase our knowledge of future change and to act to mitigate the effects of ocean acidification and other marine stresses. Countries are collaborating in ocean acidification observing programs. Initiatives like the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network bring together hundreds of scientists from all over the world to collaborate and coordinate monitoring and research that will expand regional understanding and help identify local decision-making options. Many countries don't have the capacity or the capability to make these measurements and do the research. So capacity building initiatives are required to ensure that all countries can measure and manage their own local resources, including mitigation and adaptation options. One of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, number 14.3, focuses on countries measuring and reporting ocean acidification in their coastal waters. Nationally, regionally, and locally, there are activities which can address the cause of ocean acidification and help our marine environments to be resilient, to adapt, and to recover. The most important thing to remember is that reducing carbon dioxide emissions will directly decrease the cause of ocean acidification, and actions can be on many scales, personal, local, and national. Making low emission choices for personal transport, for our food consumption and electricity usage is a really good start. And these actions can be scaled to local and national level and policies. People often find that by taking personal action, they can regain some sense of empowerment. And this is encapsulated in another Māori whakatauki from the Ngāti Wai people. E tangi ana ngā reanga o utu, e mahara ana ngā reanga a tamai ta aha rā e whakamahana taku ora kia tina. When the land, river, and sea creatures are in distress, then I have nothing to be proud of.
The third and last presenter is Dr. Kevin Conrad, who is a practicing physician and medical director of a healthcare delivery system in southern Louisiana. Dr. Conrad's research focuses on climate change and its impact on human health, with a particular interest in the adaptation of coastal communities to rapidly changing marine conditions. He is an advocate for minimizing the impact of healthcare delivery on the environment. He'll be focusing on the effects of a changing ocean on human health and healthcare provision.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. My name is Kevin Conrad. I'm a practicing physician in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'd like to spend a few minutes today talking about the connections between the oceans and human health and why it's important that we make these connections. In an increasingly interconnected world, human health is now dependent and defined by the physical conditions of the planet. We no longer have the luxury of living out our lives with any degree of isolation from disease. The rapid spread and challenges of dealing with the current COVID-19 pandemic obviously demonstrate this. That what affects areas that are most remote to us, certainly in short time, will affect all of us. This includes the driest deserts of the Sahara, the deepest regions of the seas. In the year of 2021, the world now seems a much smaller and more vulnerable place. Underlying much of our current healthcare challenges is the rapidly changing environmental conditions that we are currently experiencing. Changes that biological systems, including humankind, are ill-equipped to adapt to. I've been part of three great healthcare challenges in my medical career. First was the AIDS epidemic, then the opioid epidemic, and now the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite the tremendous loss of life in each, perhaps our greatest medical challenge will be climate change. Climate change represents an inevitable threat to humankind and will eclipse pandemics as the major source of premature death in the 21st century. Nowhere is this threat more apparent than the direct effect the rapidly changing ocean environments are having on human health. As previously discussed, the oceans have seen unprecedented changes in recent years that have included rising sea levels, ocean acidification, catastrophic weather events, and sea ice loss. Many of these factors are leading to one of the most dire consequences of all, decreasing biodiversity. These and other changes are having an additive, if not exponential, negative impact on human health. If we take a step back and view with some perspective, it is self-evident that our health is dependent on the largest and the most diverse ecosystem, the oceans. The oceans are certainly at a tipping point in relationship to having a profound impact on human health, as evidenced by several areas that I will discuss. Direct visible evidence is often the most effective in calling people to action, and this is most apparent with harmful algae blooms. There are three main types of algae blooms: cyanobacteria, dinoflagellates, and diatoms. They are naturally occurring events, but increasing sea temperatures and rising nutrient loads has changed both the distribution and size of these events. Humans are exposed to them directly through inhalation and contact through ingestion of contaminated seafood. The toxicity of these events is readily apparent by the large-scale fish kills, which are common. Current research concerning the impact of bloom toxins on human health is alarming. Studies derived from animal models suggest algae toxins exposure can lead to significant cognitive decline, hepatic dysfunction, as well as being a significant driver of genetic abnormalities. In the short term, toxin exposure leads to increased emergency room use, primarily due to respiratory, neurological, and dermatological conditions. Blooms also have significant economic impact as well. Beaches in many areas are being routinely closed for extended periods due to these blooms. As bloom outbreaks increase, our ability to monitor seafood stocks, purify drinking water, and quarantine contaminated beaches has been stretched to the breaking point. Many agencies are currently ill-equipped to meet the increasing demand. Not surprisingly, models predict that harmful algae blooms will increase in number, intensity, and geographical distribution. Algae blooms and other waterborne conditions disproportionately affect humans due to the population density located near the coast. Approximately half of all the world's population lives within 200 kilometers of the coast. Historically, this population has been susceptible to waterborne and seafood-borne infectious diseases. From typhoid to malaria, some of the greatest pandemics in history have been related to the oceans. There is evidence that a variety of marine-based bacterial and viral diseases are increasing. Tropical diseases such as dengue fever and Zika virus are spreading to previously non-tropical areas, areas where populations do not have natural immunity. Zika fever, which was a well-known disease limited to the tropics for over 60 years, has appeared in the Americas for the first time in 2015. The cause of this spread was due to the interaction of ocean temperature, currents, and precipitation, which expanded the range of its primary vector, the mosquito, Aedes aegypti. Aedes aegypti now has the most extensive range ever recorded and is found in sustainable populations as far north as Washington, D.C. In addition to infectious threats, there are a wide variety of toxic compounds that are increasingly present in the ocean waters and present both short-term and long-term risks to humans. 8 million tons of plastics are thrown into the oceans annually. It is estimated by the year 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish by weight. The damage of macroplastics to the environment is well known, but microplastics may pose an even greater risk to human health. Microplastics are formed by both direct deposition into the seas, as well as by a variety of physical actions that constantly degrade plastic content. They are defined as particles that are less than 5 millimeters in size, and their main toxicity arises from the ability to be absorbed at the cellular level. Humans ingest them through inhalation, eating seafood, direct contact. In increasing amounts, they are found in all seafood stocks, but particularly in shellfish and filter feeders. Animal models have demonstrated a wide variety of adverse effects, including an increase in malignancy, cardiac disease, as well as a novel cause of obesity. Microplastics interact with estrogen receptors and may be a factor in developing hormone-dependent tumors and other adverse conditions. Threats to the ocean are not limited to physical disease. The term blue mind was coined by neuroscientists to identify a mental state that experiences a beneficial, full awareness of water and its positive influences on life. The benefits of ocean exposure are multifactorial, but may arise from the respite achieved from an overconnected and overstimulated world. Several studies have demonstrated not only the mental, but physical benefits of living near or by water. As oceans and water pollution continues to increase, it can be expected that the benefits of our blue gym will decrease as well. Eco-anxiety, a newly defined disorder, is a condition caused by the exposure to a threatened environment. It is increasing and now recognized as a condition by the American Psychological Association. I certainly see this condition in the minds of the long-term residents of coastal Louisiana, where I live, many who simply do not view the Gulf of Mexico in the same way they once did as a child. In today's world, the benefits of the blue mind should not be underestimated. As biodiversity of the ocean decreases, our opportunities to discover new marine-based pharmaceuticals declines as well. Most of our current pharmaceuticals come from terrestrial sources. The oceans may have an even greater supply of medicinal compounds, but are more difficult to explore. With the current decline in marine biodiversity, potential marine-derived pharmaceuticals may never be discovered. I am hopeful that despite the great suffering that is incurred during the current COVID-19 pandemic, a new perspective will emerge. A perspective that acknowledges the interaction of the oceans on human health. Healthcare delivery is transitioning from a focus on the individual to a focus on populations, and by logical extension, a focus on the health of the planet. I see it in the attitudes of my medical colleagues, who now have a much more global view on human health and the impact the environment has on it. Here in southern Louisiana, the connection is obvious. Land loss, catastrophic weather events, decreased fishery, oil spills, and the emergence for the first time of environmental refugees all seem to be contributing to a fundamental change in our relationship with the seas, one that is having a direct and measurable negative impact on our health. So why make an effort to connect the oceans with human health? As this conference demonstrates, there are certainly pressing issues concerning the oceans at every turn. However, the abundance of information in the news cycle compels us to distill our message to the most basic. Human life is dependent on the oceans, and the oceans are not well. I am confident the vitality of the oceans will be preserved. Humankind simply has no other choice. What concerns me is the limited time we have to take advantage of this new perspective. How quickly we do it will determine the difference between our current state of significant health consequences due to marine factors and global catastrophe, which we can expect if action is not taken. Thank you to all who put on this event, and let's take this opportunity to learn and energize our efforts. Goodbye.
Our next segment will be a keynote address from Vladimir Ryabinin, the Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission and Assistant Director General of UNESCO. He will be sharing a message on the UNESCO Decade of Ocean Science, which has kicked off this year.
Happy World Oceans Day. This year we celebrated under the topic of life and livelihoods. The World Oceans Day was established by United Nations in 2008, but the idea goes back to the Conference on Environment and Development that took place in Rio in 1992. So that time, people also were concerned about the state of the ocean, climate, and I would like to start this little intervention by quoting the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, that stated that humankind inflicted a suicidal war on Mother Nature and need to stop that war. That equally applies to the ocean. In 2016, the first World Ocean Assessment conducted by United Nations came up with a conclusion that the humankind was running out of time to start managing the ocean sustainably. The ocean that was considered invincible, boundless, is no longer so big in the geological epoch of Anthropocene in which we live to sustain our aggression. So we need to change that. But this is a very difficult task scientifically, because our science is based on curiosity and the sense of discovery. Now we need a new science that would illuminate the way for us to recover the ocean health and start using the ocean sustainably for future generations. So the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO proposed to United Nations to conduct a decade of ocean science for sustainable development, because we need at least 10 years to really change the paradigm how we run ocean science. This proposal was endorsed, and since 1st of January this year, 2021, the decade is now on. Thousands of people participated in the design of the decade, hundreds of organizations, dozens and dozens of countries. And now we know what needs to be done. We need to inject more science in already existing ways of managing the ocean: coastal zone management, maritime spatial planning, marine protected areas, work on adaptation, mitigation, climate change. For every of these domains, we have scientific solutions. We just need to implement them and develop a co-designed series of actions. So that is exactly the sense of the Decade of Ocean Science. And I think with that approach, we will be able to change the situation in the ocean, have a more sustainable climate for the future generations, save life in the ocean, stopping the period of rapid extinction of species that is happening now. And for that, we need engagement of everyone. So my plea to you will be, please join us, scientists, practitioners, people, learn more about the ocean. And this will help us to unite forces and move towards the science we need that will generate for us conditions to arrive at the ocean we need for the future we want. Once again, happy World Oceans Day.
Thanks so much to our panelists for providing so much insight into the ocean and helping us better understand the nature of our interactions with it. Most importantly, thank you for helping us reflect and examine ways we can build a more sustainable relationship between humanity and ocean life. And I also want to thank you for tuning in. With that, we conclude a segment, A Changing Ocean. Once again, my name is Alejandro Alba, host and correspondent for Now This. If you want to follow more of these issues from a journalistic perspective, be sure to follow Now This Earth on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Our next segment will be a keynote presentation from National Geographic photographer David Dubois, who will be sharing some of his images, including the Rescuing Reefs feature of the May issue of National Geographic, available online at natgeo.com/Planet Possible.
Hello, my name is David Dubois. I am a National Geographic photojournalist. And for the last 50 years, I have been documenting reefs around the world. It's produced an archive, a chronicle, if you will, that has given me a priceless perspective of time in the sea. I'd like to share with you today a story that's just been published in the May issue, or Ocean issue, of National Geographic magazine, a story called Rescuing Reefs. We now know that reefs are a thermometer of our planet. And as temperature rises, reefs bleach, and then they die. This is Tuamun Bay in 2005. After multiple thermal events, this is what Tuamun Bay looked like in 2018. The Great Barrier Reef. We went to a beautiful reef called Opal Reef in 2009, photographed there, and taking the exact same image after two back-to-back coral bleaching episodes in 2016 and 17, went back to Opal Reef in 2018, and this is what was behind us. Here's another picture from Opal Reef, an absolute bouquet of coral, a garden of coral, 2009, and again in 2018, a cemetery. There's other pieces of Opal Reef, vibrant, full of fish, a living city in the sea, 2009, and in 2018 looked like this. But there is hope. Hope, 3 R's. Research, restoration. Scientists around the world are working constantly on these problems. And of course, there's resilience. This is a survivor reef in the northern part of the Barrier Reef, with cuttlefish swimming over an absolute meadow of living coral. And of course, the most exciting, a survivor reef that reproduces. Coral reproduces at one moment, all in one night, one day of the year. And this is an explosion of life. It is hope, hope that corals will survive. But we have to make choices which affect survival of the reef itself. I wish all of you a very, very happy Oceans Day. Thank you.